with my name. You shall be Blacula.
Hey gang, Uncle Todd here, and it's a twofer this week. One, the second of my four-part tribute to blaxploitation horror films, and two, this is a romantic vampire film. So, take two. This is a romantic vampire film, and this is probably the first of the vampire films where a vampire finds his true love has been reincarnated, paving the way for Dan Curtis's TV version of Dracula with Jack Palance, and of course Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman. But this isn't about Dracula. Well, he's in the pre-credit sequence. We start in 1780 in Transylvania, where Prince Mamuwalde and his wife Luva have traveled from Africa to Transylvania to seek Count Dracula's help in ending the slave trade. But this doesn't quite have the response Mamuwalde was hoping.
Totally cease the slave trade? I find that unrealistic. Slavery has merit, I believe.
Merit? You find merit in barbarity?
Barbarous from the standpoint of the slave, perhaps.
Dracula then hits on Luva, which really ticks off Mamuwalde. And then he gets his second surprise about Castle Dracula. Yes, Dracula, having been insulted by someone not bowing down before them, especially someone of what he would consider lesser, turns Mamuwalde into a vampire. But his revenge against this slight isn't over. He locks Mamuwalde into a coffin so that he will spend eternity never able to feed, gnawed at by a constant hunger. As for Luva, she's sealed into this hidden chamber with Mamuwalde's coffin, so that Mamuwalde can hear her slowly die from starvation. Cruel man. Well, after the credits, we jump to the 1970s, where two fabulous antique dealers / nightclub owners buy the entire estate of the castle. All the furniture, all the dressings. And when they find the hidden chamber with Mamuwalde's coffin, they take that too. Shipping it all to Los Angeles, where, while they're unpacking, one of them cuts himself, and as they had just unlocked the coffin, it doesn't end well for them.
Bobby,
Having sated his bloodlust for the first time in a few hundred years, he goes back to his coffin. The next night, he visits the mortuary where one of the victims' bodies is held, where he sees relatives and friend of the victim, Dr. Thomas, Michelle, his girlfriend, and Michelle's sister, Tina. And this is a shock and delight to Mama Walde.
Poor Bobby. We've known him since we were kids.
Yep. She is the spitting image of his wife, obviously been reincarnated. Oh, fate has been kind to Mama Walde. Well, when the two women leave, he follows them. Meanwhile, Dr. Thomas wants to examine the body, and we get one of the great patented jump scares.
Did I startle you, sir?
Yes, that cliche's been around since the 1950s. Further examining the body, Dr. Thomas finds there are a couple of strange marks on his neck. On his neck. And that the body has been drained of blood. So he makes arrangements to have the body shipped to his lab so he can do another autopsy examination. Meanwhile, Tina and Michelle separate. Michelle going off to Bobby's, where she will meet Dr. Thomas, as they examine stuff at his apartment. Well, Tina decides to go home, where Mama Walde bumps into her, and in his excitement of seeing her, scares the heck out of her, and she runs off with him in pursuit. She drops her purse, which he picks up, and he might have caught up with her, except for this cap. Yep. In his frustration, he bites the cab driver, vampirizing her. That'll be important later. The next morning, Dr. Thomas calls about the picking up of Bobby's remains and finds that he's not there. He's disappeared. So he then puts in a request for the autopsies on Bobby and his partner, Billy. And tells the officer who's sent to pick them up that he'll be at their regular nightclub they frequent. Mama Walde shows up at the nightclub too, having followed Tina from her home. And it is here, in a clever bit of filmmaking, the Hughes Corporation sings a song that is very relevant to the scene. There he is again. Well, it's no rock the boat, but not bad. Anyway, after apologizing to Tina, she seems intrigued by him and has him join their party where he orders champagne. And they talk, and things are going well until the photographer takes a picture of him. After that, he excuses himself, and having been introduced to Skillet, we get this great bit of dialogue.
Say, man, that is one strange dude.
That is Jaitu Kumbaka. He doesn't really have a lot to do with the movie. Just he's in a couple scenes where he admires Mamoru's cape and reiterates how he's strange. We'll see more of him in a later episode. Back to this one. Mamoru follows the photographer back to her place where she has a dark room. As luck would have it, the officer who was getting the autopsy reports is parking his car. She lives right next to the nightclub, and sees her stumble out of the house. He goes over to see what's wrong, and she bites him. Pretty quick turnover there. The next day, Dr. Thomas has examined the body of the taxi driver, having noticed that she had similar symptoms to Bobby. He wants to disinter Billy and do another autopsy, but the family has denied this. So he and Michelle sneak out that night and do a little digging on their own. His vampire suspicions confirmed, he immediately calls the morgue and wants the attendant there to pull the cab driver's body out of the freezer to thaw it out. But once he's done that, he has to lock the door and not go in again. Meanwhile, Mamoru has gone to see Tina, and he tells her everything about himself. How old he is, the vampirism, and how he wants her to join him, but he will not force her. This has to be of her own choice, her own free will, and if she chooses no, he will leave and never come near her again. She's hesitant at first, but when he gets up to leave, we learned something else about vampires we didn't know before.
My Tina, you're so beautiful.
I won't let you leave me.
I must. There's no other way. To stay is to die.
I want to go with you, but I'm afraid.
I promise you it will not be unpleasant or painful.
Yep, vampires can have sex. You wouldn't think so, because they got no blood pushing through them, but they were in bed together. Had to have happened. He's unclothed. Okay then. Now we know. Meanwhile, the morgue attendant had gotten distracted by a phone call and forgot to lock the door. And this leads to probably the most iconic scene from this film. It's the one everybody probably remembers from it. Pretty freaky, huh? And of course, the lab attendant there, Elisha Cook Jr., who you may remember from the episode where I looked at I Wake Up Screaming. Very prolific character actor. Great character actor. Back to the story. Dr. Thomas drops off Michelle and then goes to get his disbelieving friend, Lieutenant Peterson of the police. And they go to the morgue. Good thing it was so close to dawn. Well, she was a vampire. Billy was a vampire. Bobby's probably a vampire. Who's the one that started the whole vampire thing here? Well, there is that strange guy who's been seeing Tina. Perhaps it might be a good idea to feel him out a little.
What do you think of vampires?
Vampires? I think they're possibly the most fascinating of all.
Do you believe they exist?
Well, does the devil exist? People have believed so for thousands of years.
You seem well informed.
Oh, perhaps.
As he and Tina prepare to leave, we get Skillet.
You know, he is a strange dude.
Anyway, having realized that the photographer has not been at work the past couple of nights, and that she did take a picture of Mama Waldy, Dr. Thomas goes over to her place and finds the proof he needed. Yep. Vampires do not photograph. With this proof, he realizes Tina's in danger and rushes over there, where Mama Waldy smacks him around before escaping. Not knowing where Mama Waldy is, Peterson puts out an APB on Bobby. He's spotted the next night, and they follow him to the warehouse that they were killed at. That must be where Mama Waldy's coffin is. So, they have a police raid, and it is carnage.
Now!
Good thing they had those lamps there. They killed all the vampires except Mama Waldy, who appears, taunts them, and then leaves. Realizing he's going after Tina, they set up a stakeout around her apartment building, but he contacts her with his vampiric mental powers, and she slips away. But they're spotted, and they're chased into the tunnels of an old abandoned chemical plant. And then disaster strikes. Enraged, he kills the officer. Tina's dying. In order to save her, he bites her. And then he lets Thomas know just what's gonna happen.
You and your dear friends are dead. Not one man shall escape my vengeance. Not one man shall leave here alive. Search out every shadow, every corner. This will be your inglorious tomb.
Then he goes to town.
We got him! He's up here! Quick!
But luck seems to change. They find his coffin. Reasoning he must be inside, they prepare to whip it open and slam a stake down. And disaster enters the picture again. Yep. It was Tina. Mama Waldy, having lost his love a second time, loses all anger, vengeance, the will to go on. He says his goodbyes to Tina and then walks into the sun. And thus, we say goodbye to one of the greatest vampires to ever grace the silver screen. This is a great film. I mean, okay, the title, yeah, that's cringe. And while this could have just been a really lame campy vampire film, William Marshall makes it so much more. He's a great actor. I mean, blessed with that amazing voice. And he gives Mama Waldy, notice he never says Blacula any time throughout this film. Only Dracula called him that. Although he would use the term in the sequel, Scream, Blacula, Scream. Might do that one next year. Anywho, yeah, great voice. And it is a shame that once the trend of blaxploitation had started to wane, he did not manage to cross over. And I think today he is only really known for, at least people of a certain generation, as the king of cartoons from Pee-wee's Playhouse. Unfortunately, Pee-wee's, or I should say Paul Rubin's scandal over public indecency has probably caused the show not to be seen as much as it was. But guys I knew in college loved the show. And I would get a kick out of seeing Blacula, Prince Mama Waldy, come in and say, "Time for another cartoon." I can't do the voice. I can't go that low. But yeah, he's a Shakespearean trained actor. And if there was any justice in this world, he would have been a huge star. You know, up there with Clint Eastwood, Burt Reynolds, Sidney Poitier, you know, up in that echelon. But sadly, it was not to be. But he brings a lot of dignity, class, acting talent, and a sly sense of humor to the role. One of my favorites is when he sits down at the bar in the second bar scene and requests a Bloody Mary. And just the way he orders it. Yeah, he gets some great dialogue in this film, and he relishes it. Now, according to IMDb, he actually came up with the idea of making him an African prince, feeling that the original characterization was kind of, let's face it, derivative. The only other actor in here I'm familiar with is Denise Nichols as Michelle, and that's mainly because she was my dad's favorite show was In the Heat of the Night, and she was a series regular in the later seasons. I believe she played a DA who was friends with Carol O'Connor's sheriff. Jaitu Kumbaka I remember from his short-lived stint on The Man Called Sloan back in the 80s, where he had a mechanical hand with all these attachments he could do with it. Samus Rasoluta, I think I'm pronouncing it right. I do remember seeing him in some films later on. I think he was in an episode of Star Trek Next Generation or Deep Space Nine, one of those. And, of course, the Hughes Corporation had their hit, Rock the Boat, Don't Rock the Boat, Baby. A staple of 70s nostalgia, or I should say, oldies stations. But, yeah, this is a very interesting film just from the standpoint that it touches on slavery, prejudice, and a certain amount of romantic tragedy in it. Very few actors could have pulled off that scene at the end where Marshall bids goodbye to his love and then walks into the sunlight, physically forcing himself into it, from pushing through the pain and agony that the sun is causing him to die. Yeah, it is a very moving portrayal, and one of the more sympathetic monsters that came out, especially for vampires, is he often gave off this feeling of not really liking what he's doing, but forced to do it to survive. And in the sequel, he also had a certain amount of disgust for the way some people are treating other people within the same community. But as I said, that's for another episode. But yeah, Marshall really takes something that could have been a very schlocky and insulting horror film and made it something magnificent. One of the best of the 70s, if not all time, my opinion. Okay, there's some campy moments that keep it from getting up really, really higher than other things, but for the 70s, this was amazing. Thoughtful. Provocative, even. Unfortunately, next week from the high of this, we have the low of Blackenstein. But until then, please hit like, share, and subscribe, and stay after the credits for my favorite scene.
Good evening, gentlemen. I say, were you looking for me? I guess I should have told you this evening that I decided to move my coffin. But then it was you who gave me the idea.